So when I'm talking about the heart of business, I'm going into organisations, I'm doing talks, and I'm working with individuals and teams, and I'm helping them to understand themselves better. Because what I do know is that a lot of the individuals that I work with, who are highly driven, highly ambitious, very, very successful, often incredibly wealthy individuals, that there is something that's not going quite right in their life, albeit a relationship, or they found themselves in their late 30s and they're experiencing, particularly for women, they're suddenly like, hang on a minute, I'm in my late 30s and my early 40s. Where are my children? Where's my relationship? And what's going on? And they're really feeling the pressure of those societal norms, and they're judging themselves really, really hardly. Yet they've got all this success and all this achievement around them. So it's been a great honour, actually, in working with a lot of women over the last year, 18 months, to help them to create more balance and to tune into themselves and to honour what's most important to them. It's not to say it needs to be one or the other, but things have just got a little bit out of kilter. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. And I've had the honour, as a lot of you know, of working in some really dynamic environments such as Twitter, and doing talks with Google and Spotify. And my journey with Twitter, I've worked with Twitter now for over 2 years, and they have the most amazing working culture. And they're not part of the Facebook, kind of ownership, Instagram. They're very unique in terms of their ownership. So they really are about family values, and the benefits and the attention they give their staff is quite phenomenal. And actually they went on lockdown 2 to 3 weeks before the rest of the country, because as soon as they got whiffed of the, kind of coronavirus sweeping through the country, they recognised that, hang on a minute, our employees are coming into Soho, central London, every single day. We don't want our workforce to go down, and we really value them. And whilst a lot of them weren't particularly happy about it, they immediately stopped international travel and they sent them all home. That was 2 to 3 weeks before that happened for us. So they're now in their 5th or 6th week of working from home. What that tells me, of course, is they're protecting the needs of the business, yet they're also really taking very immediate measures to protect their people and the health of their people. They're very, very family-orientated companies, so they've been a joy to work with. So, okay, so that's a little bit about what I do in the corporate space, and the strength and resilience to be in those spaces absolutely comes from a very, very strong purpose to bring that heart into business. And when I set up my business 3 years ago, I didn't come from a corporate space. I came from education, and I retrained in psychology. And I really had to soul search to find out whether that was going to be a suitable environment for me to be in, and how I was going to remain resilient and not burn out in those environments. And I did a little soul searching lying on the beach in Goa with Hannah, who's on the call, and came back. And my first gig was at Twitter, and that was, and it's sort of all gone from there, really. So yeah, we'll see what happens as a result of the coronavirus. So we can't avoid it. It's so topical for us right now. And I'm really interested and really curious about people's response to the coronavirus. And my response absolutely required me to take a dose of my own medicine. So when it started to become apparent that, gosh, this is quite serious and things are going to change, policies coming out, companies are responding, people are starting to work from home, this isn't just going to kind of, pass overnight. I went into a bit of a meltdown. I became very derailed, and this business that I'd been going for 3 years, and particularly over the last 6 months, I've been working quite relentlessly on a very strong pipeline that would be enough work to see me through for the next 12 months. And I've been putting a lot of energy into that, and I just saw it disappear in front of me. I saw that work completely pause, and I felt devastated. I went into grief. And then I had a big conflict with the fact that, hang on a minute, I'm a coach and I can really support people and I can really help people at this time. And I didn't have the capacity to do that. And I felt I was watching lots of other disappointments around me. So friends having to wrap up their companies, having to let go of their staff, close friends that were having to cancel all their weddings. And it just felt incredibly disappointing. So I thought, okay, I've got this conflict now. If I tune into myself, I need to cry, I need to fall over, I need to kind of be with that. And at the same time, I've got this conflict that I'm seeing other people respond and, you know, be part of the solution. And I thought, do you know what? I'm just not ready to join that party yet. And my partner, Al, who's on the call, and I had planned in January. I recognised that it had been about a year since I'd properly switched off, and we'd planned a week in Devon, and that was last week. And so we went and we had 4 amazing days, and we cut the holiday short and came back to Bristol, which was the right thing to do. But it was a challenge to relax, because obviously we had the background noise of coronavirus and whether or not, you know, we ought to be, kind of enjoying ourselves in nature and get back to the house and settle down. So part of me as well was very resistant to the fact that if we came back, that would mean that I'd have to get my head back into work. And when I came back, I just didn't have the energy to do very much for a couple of days. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to answer a few emails and I'm going to put this to one side and I'm going to do this lull really, really well. And Joe, when we spoke last Friday, and I think I just, and it's interesting you say, well done for getting out of bed, because that's what it felt like last Friday. I just managed to go downstairs, get some breakfast and sit on the laptop in bed having a chat with you. And I recognize that, and you said something that was really helpful. And I said, how are you, Joe? And you said, yeah, I'm riding the wave. And that's exactly what this experience feels like. And the more that we can honor that, the better I think we can respond and we can look after ourselves. And, by honoring that dip really, really well, by talking it out with some close friends, reaching out to my healing network. So Avanti, who is one of the BrightSky ambassadors, Joy Lovesey, who's a fantastic practitioner, and a very dear friend of mine who is a transformational coach, Verity Richards. Reaching out to them and receiving some healing and encouragement, and just that softness and that gentleness, and giving myself that kindness, that tuning in was like, I'm not going to beat myself up about being in this space. I'm going to do this space really, really well. And I'm going to be messy in this space so that I'm able to bounce back. And sure enough, by the weekend and yesterday, I felt, right, I'm ready to respond. I'm ready to join this party. And I'm ready to see this as an opportunity. Because obviously there is all sorts of responses to what we're experiencing: disappointment, sadness, loneliness, isolation, opportunity, change, and potentially a great healing for the planet. So what I really, the key point I'm making here, and the key point I do my best to make in my trainings and my work with people, is that your superpower is not staying in alignment. It's not staying focused and being guns all blazing. It's actually recognizing when you're not in alignment and how to tune in and to give yourself what you need and to take responsibility and ask for what you need, so that you can actually come back to your alignment even more effectively. And that's a real skill, actually, because I think if we sometimes try and do half and half, then those experiences get quite blurred. And when sometimes we need to make arrangements, if we've got, we're in family structures and so on, to be able to really take that deep rest and to come back. So that was my experience. And then since then, I've been thinking about the psychological impact of the coronavirus. And my intention in the time that we've got is to share 2 or 3 takeaways with you. So it's not just going to be me talking. I am going to ask you a couple of questions. And if you've got a pen or paper with you, then that might be helpful to make a couple of notes with some questions that I've got for you. So the psychological impact of coronavirus and what that means for business. So lots of people have that initial reaction, and there's a reaction to an external threat, which is the coronavirus and the change that that's going to have with business and our way of life. So the way that we can respond to that will be unique to our experience and where we are. And what I observed was my friends and my clients who had the greatest amount of security in their life with regards to their salary and their positions with their company and whether they were going to get a grant or not from the government were more resilient or better able to respond in the last couple of weeks than those that didn't have a guarantee over their security. So this is really hitting people at that base. So it's recognising that that can be very, very destabilising. And I recognise in myself when, you know, Bojo came out with that announcement, or the Chancellor around supporting self-employed people, that has had an impact and made me feel more secure. So the psychological impact, and I've got a mentor called Jeremy Holt who works at the Centre for Team Excellence at Sussex University, and I've listened to a couple of talks from him over the last couple of days, and he talks about some research that a group of researchers led by a guy called Jackson did in recent years, and they basically looked at how people respond to world crisis. So they looked at the community response to the Second World War, and they looked at the community response to 9/11. And what they discovered is that our initial response to these type of events is that there is a greater togetherness. So the threat of the external threat is that potentially it's going to divide us. So our immediate response is that we're like, right, how can we keep togetherness going? How can we come together? How can we use technology to keep connected? And then what happens over time is that energy, that burst of excitement and that energy decreases. And actually, as we recognise that we could be in this space for the next few months, the energy for togetherness potentially will decline. And I think that's a really important insight as for us as individuals and within our businesses and our communities, because everybody's adjusting quite well now. How are they going to be in sort of 3 to 4 to 5 to a couple of months' time? And what I recognise, and given that the majority of us have a lot of time for heart-based practices, is that I think we've got a real opportunity and a contribution to make to reach out to people within our community, our networks, our families, our friends, to support them to tune in. Because what I recognise in my clients in the corporate space is the biggest challenge of this time is being still. Because when we're still, our stuff comes up. Now, some of that stuff can be really helpful and really nice. So when we've got stillness and we're feeling in a good place, we might lean into creativity, and we might do more cooking, or we might do more art, or we might, you know, do some of the jobs around the house that we haven't done for a while. And also sometimes in that stillness, we can find that our fears and our anxieties, our disappointments might be coming up and bubbling up. Our insecurities might be coming up. Now, what we'll often do to avoid those, because they're uncomfortable to look at, is we'll lean into addictive behaviour. So that might be kind of leaning into excessive alcohol or smoking or porn or kind of drugs or whatever it might be. Now, all of that is absolutely fine in moderation. I know myself at the weekend, I sunk into a few bottles of wine and had a couple of cheeky cigs out the back. So, you know, it's recognizing that when we're kind of being excessive with that behavior, a lot of it is a distraction. And I think we've got an opportunity to support people within our networks to be okay with falling over or finding this difficult, or deep, deep rest, and knowing that it's temporary, and then that they're going to kind of bounce back and come back to things as well. So that's just, a bit of a calling that certainly I'm aware of with some of my very sort of my friends and family that are very addicted to busyness and keeping themselves busy and productive, because a lot of their self-worth, as I've experienced in my life, is wrapped up around doing. I feel good about myself when I'm being productive and I'm doing and I'm completing tasks. Do I feel good about myself when I'm naked and I'm bare and I'm full of fear? You know, and that's certainly been some self-discovery and a journey that I've been on. So talking about fear, and yeah, I'd be really interested to hear about how people are managing their fear, because it's become a new curiosity of me. And I've done some great work with a friend and a member of BrightSky in Bristol called Jo Lovesey, and she's got a self-love course starting online on the 23rd of April for anybody that's interested. And Joy's really helped me to understand how to process fear. And I find all sorts of ways in order to kind of oppress that fear. And one of the most effective ways I've been working with is to close my eyes and to feel that fear and that panic, and then almost to visualize, and I love visualizations, it dissolving. So it almost pops into sparkles of light. So if it's a bit of a dark, murky cloud, I almost see that infusion of light coming in, and it starts to kind of perforate it and pops it. So there's different ways that we can work with processing and working with fear, and also how it happens. So I recognised that every time I tapped into the media, another layer of fear would come on me. I kind of feel all right and be like, yeah, I've got this and I've got support around me and this is what's going on. And then I hear the latest headline and instantly could just feel that contraction of fear. So I've become really sensitive to that and really aware of that, and also really choosy about how I engage with the external media and where I'm going to get my information from. And because I felt like I've been in a very sensitive place, I've actually asked my partner Al to just give me the headlines of what I need to know, or my family to give me the headlines of what I need to know. Now, I don't need to do that particularly for very long, but that's worked for me at the moment. And just to give you a bit of an anecdote about this and a bit of a playful one. So Al, being helpful over the weekend, gave me a couple of headlines of what was going on. And one of them was that our recycling might not get picked up because, you know, there might not be enough refuge workers, and that's been hit in Bristol. And suddenly, and then off he went because he was just sharing that information, which was absolutely fine. I was standing in the kitchen and I suddenly felt a layer of fear come over me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like our waste isn't going to get picked up and the kitchen's going to be full from weeks of all this. And what are we going to do with it? And isn't that interesting if our houses actually become burdened with a load of rubbish? And that's kind of what the planet's been experiencing. We're going to have a really real life experience of kind of dealing with having to be around kind of our rubbish and so on. So I was really aware that straight away my thinking started to kind of whirl into this place of fear. And I was like, okay, deep breath. Most likely at the moment, the recycling and will be picked up, and okay, the tip's closed, but we'll be able to find space to put the rubbish if we need be. And, let's just kind of, I can wash it and make sure it doesn't get smelly and all the rest of it. So I felt like I dealt with that. And then on Monday morning, when I heard the recycling guys outside, I was literally downstairs, half dressed with my towel around me. I flung out the front door and was like, I love you guys so much. I'm so grateful for you. And was like completely gushing over them, half dressed. And they turned around completely shocked and slightly bemused to see this woman in a towel at the door, kind of declaring her love and appreciation for them. So my sense of relief in that moment, I suppose, was in a way was equal to the amount of fear that I had felt about rubbish. So it's interesting that depending on where we sit, we can have different experiences of those of fear, and how we dissolve that and come back to ourselves feels really important. And what a lot of talking heads and certainly a lot of psychologists talk about, and I think we recognise in our own lives, is the experience of control. And when we're experiencing an external threat, we often have the need to want to come down, top down on control. And you see this in a lot of business. For a lot of business execs, the more that I can control within the business, the more that I can control in the market, the more certainty that gives us. And, often people are leading and managing from a place, what's motivating them is that they want control. Now, whilst that might mean that they are particularly robust at taking on a lot of responsibility, it comes with a consequence. So, you know, that consequence of needing to control everything can obviously be very stress and anxiety inducing. And I sat with this concept for a long time in education, when I would be looking at the students that we were working with, and particularly around assessment and exam time, just feeling that the levels of stress and pressure that they were under was so unhelpful, and the level of pressure and stress that the teachers were under was not conducive to creating a really successful learning environment. And when I first started working for Professor Steve Peters, who I worked with for 4 years, and Steve is the author of The Chimp Paradox, so I had lots of fun working in his company where I met Sabrina. And this was a big concept that really resonated with me when I first started working with Steve. And at that time, I was still in education. So I was able to bring this concept into schools, and I now bring this concept into teams, and it has a great impact. And this is this phenomena that we're dealing with in life, is that our success is often based on things that we can't control. So if we think about this in organisations, and I work with a lot of sales teams, and they have a huge financial target above their heads. And every day they're coming into work, and what's on their mind, their preoccupation and their thinking is, am I on my number? Am I on my number? Am I hitting my number? And of course, every day that they don't see that they're near to that number, they feel very depleted, quite disempowered, and they go home and they don't get a sense of fulfillment. So it's the same sort of concept with a student who potentially, you know, when we grade, when in schools, when you know, the whole performance culture is grading students on whether you get an A, a B, or a C, or I believe now it's a point system. And, you know, if you've been predicted a B and you do a mock exam and it comes back and you get a D, then you're going to be pretty demotivated. And given that a lot of teenagers are experiencing a vast array of getting to know themselves and emotions, it's really hard to be focused if you feel that the target that you're getting is way out of sight. So what we did in education, and what I do in corporates now, is I say, okay, so that's the financial target. Okay, that's what we're heading for. Now, that isn't completely under our control. But what's under our control is the effort, the steps, the things that we can control, which will get us to that target. So I worked with Hotwire for 2 years, which is a large global PR company, and they've got offices in London. And I worked closely with the MD, who was a bit down in the dumps that in the second year of him being in charge of the London office, profit had fallen. So I said, right, okay, well, tell me about how you measure performance with the team. And he was like, well, we have this one big target, and it was literally on the wall. And I was like, what impact do you think that's having for people if they've had a bad day or they're not hitting their number? And he could recognise that was quite fear-inducing. So I said, what do you know about your business that gets people to hit their numbers? He says it's quality content, quality communication with clients, and quality collaboration with one another within the team dynamics. I was like, there you go. That is your emphasis for success. So those 3 components are completely under everybody's control, whether they're producing quality content, how they're collaborating, and how they're communicating with their clients. So he completely changed the whole way that they were measuring performance and success for people. And by saying to people, this is the big target that we all want to get for the next financial year, yet all you guys need to do is focus on these 3 effort areas, because doing these 3 things well are all about your effort. And sure enough, over the next year, that's what they did. And they absolutely smashed the profit from the previous year, like with a few noughts on the end. So the point I'm making here, and wouldn't it be lovely, and we did this in a couple of schools, as Sabrina would have experienced as well, where we basically encouraged the the whole assessment structure to be based on a student's effort. So even if a student could be standing on the same platform who got an A grade and got a C grade, but both of them got an A for their effort, and they were on the same platform, irrelevant of the grade that they got. And when we focus and we help all of ourselves, including young people, to say, okay, if what's under your control, which is effort-based, can help you to get there, just focus on that. Bring it back to yourself rather than worrying about this external measurement that you can't completely control. So this really came up for myself, and hopefully is a concept that you know may resonate for you, is that when we can feel that anxiety or that fear rising, we're most likely focusing on something that's not under our control. Yet my question to you, if you just take a minute to think, is, given that we are facing several months of a change in the way of life and adjustment and social distancing and so on, and this may be affecting your businesses as well, whilst it also may be presenting some opportunities for your businesses. My question to you, and I'm going to be quiet for a moment while you just observe what comes up for you, is what do you want for yourselves? What do you want for yourself? How do you want to be during this time? So the question is, how do you want to be? Okay, so in order to maintain that, what would it take what can you do in order to maximize the probability of that happening? So it might be self-care in there. It might be reaching out to your network. It might be doing research. It might be any number of things that might be coming up for you. But based on how you want to be, or possibly what you want for yourself or your business, what effort-based qualities are under your control that you can focus on? So for me, I know that it's self-care, I know that it's managing my mindset, and I know that it's about morning practice for me, which I'll come on to talk about. And I encourage you that when you start to feel like, you know, kind of those layers of fear or whatever visualization works for you, the nervous system's starting to go up, the panic's kind of setting in, you're concerned about your loved ones and so on, you've gone external. You know, you've gone to the sort of macro, if you like. And taking that breath and just bringing it back to you and think, okay, so what is under my control with this situation? What can I do about it? I can be there for my family. I can, you know, I can show up and I can listen. I can't necessarily fix and solve everything for them. So just a concept there to work with, and this is what I call a redefinition of success. So bringing that definition of success for yourself, and defining that by the principles and qualities that are under your control. Okay, so one of those things that's under our control, or at least we can work to manage it, as because it's incredibly powerful, is our mindset. And what I'd like you to do, and I think most of you have got a pen or paper in front of you, is I'm gonna introduce three phrases or mention three phrases to you, three words. And as I go through them, I'd just like you to observe what's coming up in your mind, and maybe just drop down a couple of phrases or a few words when I say this to you. Okay, and I'll give you sort of about 20 seconds on each one just to observe what comes up. So if it's just one word, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so the first word that I'm going to introduce to you, and to be observant of any phrases or what comes up for you when I say this, is coronavirus. So any words or phrases or feelings that come up for you when I say that. The next The next phrase is being at home. So being at home. Any words, any thoughts, any feelings, what comes up for you? And the last phrase is the future. The future. Any thoughts, feelings, or words that come up for you? Okay, so now I'd like you to either consider what came up for you, if you just made a mental note, or if you wrote it down, just glance at those words or those phrases that you've written down. And I'd just like you to consider whether what you've written down is anxiety inducing for you, so it soothes your system. So with what you've written down, is it helping in terms of kind of soothing? Is it helping you to remember when you thought about how you want to be? Is it helping that, or is it hindering that? So in a very simple way, what you've done there is you've very briefly done a very quick top slice of what's in your mindset when you think about coronavirus, when you think about being at home, and when you think about the future. And what I'm encouraging you to do there with that sort of thread of thinking about how you want to be, with regards to what's in your mindset, is that either helping or is it either hindering how you want to be? And if there's things that are really helping that, fantastic. And if you've recognised there's a couple of things that maybe you're feeling fearful about the future, maybe you're feeling unsure, then that's okay. Again, tuning in and being kind to that and recognising, well, that's pretty normal because there's a lot of uncertainty going on. Yet, I do have a choice with regards to how I want to think and feel about the future. And if I want to have something that's more soothing in my system, then maybe I could have something around, I don't know what's going to happen, yet I trust myself that I will be able to respond to whatever comes up. Something that's reassuring for the system, so that whenever the future comes up, or ever thinking about the business or what's going to happen with the family, housing, any number of anything that comes up, that actually your response is more resilient than perhaps if there was, I'm really fearful of the future, and that could potentially trigger the nervous system and go into a bit of fear. Now, the important point to make here is there's no right or wrong with what sits in that mindset. It's just, it can help in these times to just do a little bit of clearing up and just to check in with ourselves, what's in there, what's helping or hindering us, and what could do with a little bit of a tweak. And that can certainly help us, to be more resilient, to be more responsive, and to work towards how we want to be in these times. Okay, so the last concept that I wanted to talk about before we open it up is my absolute favourite, which is morning practice. And when I worked for Steve Peters, this was one of the most favourite aspects of the psychological work that he taught us. And he would really drill in and sort of hold us to account around this as well. So, you turn up for a meeting and he'd say, right, what happened in your morning practice this morning, Tamson? And I'd be like, and he'd say, you haven't done it, have you? And of course, then I realised how important it is. And he used the analogy of, when we go to our computer, and if it's like mine, a rather aging Mac, when you turn the on button, it clearly takes 30 seconds to a minute for everything to upload and for all of the apps to come up. And there I am getting slightly frustrated that it's taking, oh my gosh, 30 seconds to do that. And it's a bit like our mindsets in the morning. when we wake up in the morning, we're most likely firing from our emotional processing part of the brain, which is the amygdala. And what's really helpful is before we just launch ourselves into our day, we tune in and we take a moment for ourselves. And this can be 3 to 5 minutes. In fact, almost the less time that you tell yourself you're going to do it, the more likely you are that you'll do it. And so I've got 3 questions for you that I use in my morning practice. And wherever I am, wherever I go, as long as I've got my journal and a pen with me, I can do this. And it absolutely resets and sets my mindset up for the day. And these questions, these 3 incredibly powerful yet simple questions are, how am I feeling? How am I feeling? And the second question is, what is currently most important to me? And the third question is, how do I want to be today? Now, the psychology behind those 3 very simple questions is that when we come to a space and we've honoured a bit of sacred space for ourselves, the most helpful technique is to ask ourselves a question, because then the mind will respond rather than kind of, sitting there staring at the walls thinking, what's going on? So through asking our question, the mind responds. That first question being, how am I feeling, talks straight to that emotional core, because that's the part of the brain that you're most likely in the morning, or if you're responding and feeling a bit, kind of het up about anything. And the more nonsense you can write, the better, because that shows that you're really accessing, that emotional center, that emotional processing part of the mind. And then you'll naturally just sort of feel that, yeah, okay, I've done with that. Or maybe I had a bit of a dodgy dream or something I feel a bit triggered about. The second question being, what is currently most important to you, locks you in, takes you into that alignment, reminds you of what's most important. So for me, over the last few days, it was getting the environment right in the house so that I can feel good, relaxed and productive this week. So for 3 days, that's what I wrote in my diary, in my journal, getting the house, getting the environment right. And then how do I want to be, was thinking, okay, well, what have I got ahead of me today? What's going on? I want to be joyful. I want to be positive, just thinking about the day. Or also I want to be quiet. I want to make sure I get a bit of time in, for a bit of downtime or so on. And what you've done there through those 3 questions is you've therefore warmed up your mindset. And I really invite you to give it a go and to set yourself out maybe only 3 to 5 minutes, and where you can start that practice or you can add it to your morning practice, and just see the difference that it makes and the clarity and fulfillment that you can actually start your day with from a really, really healthy kind of warmed up space before all of the other noise starts coming in. And I know through some of you on the call and Celia, we've we've experienced all sorts of different types of qualities of morning practice, and it's something that we really enjoy. And if I know that I've got to, probably not now, even leave the house early, it's become such a automatic habit for me now. I'll make sure that I get up even earlier to get that morning practice in, because it makes such a difference. Okay, so there's just in summary then of the talk, and if you've got any, I'll pass over to Jo in a moment. So we've talked about the psychological impact of CV, and I suppose just that, that calling that, what's coming up for me is that for a lot of people, experiencing stillness is going to be quite challenging. And that if we've got skills in those areas, then let's watch out and think about who within our networks and our community that we could perhaps just check in with and support with the skills that we can offer in that space. And in terms of thinking about what's success for ourselves right now, having that definition that is effort-based and under your control. Just thinking about what's coming up around our mindset, what's helping and hindering us being and responding, and how we want to be in this time. And then that morning practice to help us to warm up our mindset so we can start our day with clarity.